The 2022 Disney Plus streaming series, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, was extremely polarizing among Marvel fans, and not just the toxic ones who review bomb any trailer that features a superhero with breasts. And no, I'm not talking about Fat Thor. The show about Bruce Banner's younger cousin took a unique approach to Jennifer Walters' life as we followed her working as an attorney in LA while trying to find love in a male-dominated world, while also finding the time to twerk at work. The titular character is played by the talented Tatiana Maslany, who brings a sense of honesty and relatability to the role, regardless of if you loved or hated the story that the writers told on the streaming series. Maslany's performance was unanimously respected. She was good in both human and Hulk form, and she also made you believe she could be part of Mark Ruffalo's extended family. Now, the Disney Plus series is definitely taking major aspects from writer John Byrne's run on the Marvel comic book series, with Jennifer being a lawyer, working on superhero cases, and breaking the fourth wall by talking to the camera. But now we have to ask the all-important question we ask every week. Is she comics accurate? For those of you who have not been to my channel before, I'm going to compare and contrast three main aspects of She-Hulk between her original comic book version and the MCU live-action version. The three aspects are personality, appearance, and abilities. After I make my comparison, I'm going to use a comic book rack to assign the live-action version of the character a comics-accurate score ranging from 1 to 5 comic racks. If you don't know what a 5-rack movie is, think The Batman, while a 1-rack movie would be X-Men Origins Wolverine. If I could give that one less than 1 rack, I would. I'm going to also assess if its comic accuracy is for the better or worse for the character. In this breakdown, we're only going to focus on her comic book origins and storylines as the source material. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's get into it. She-Hulk was created by Stan Lee and John Buscema and debuted in her self-titled comic, The Savage She-Hulk issue number 1 in November of 1979. The decision to create the character came about during the run of the Incredible Hulk television series that aired from 1977 to 1982 and gave me a giant green Lou Ferrigno nightmare as a kid. Marvel Comics was concerned that the producer of the Universal television series, Kenneth Johnson, would create a female version of the character in which the publisher would have no controlling rights. Johnson already had history rebooting or she-booting a show with a superpowered male lead when he created the Bionic Woman after the success of the $6 Million Man series. Lee and Buscema only worked on the first issue, with the series being stewarded onward by writer David Anthony Kraft and penciled by Mike Bosberg for the next 25 issues. After the Savage She-Hulk series ended in 1982, the character continued to guest appear in other Marvel comic book titles. In 1989, She-Hulk was given a new solo series titled The Sensational She-Hulk, which is a lot more flattering than her previous title, Savage, which was written and drawn by John Byrne, whose stories heavily influenced the Disney Plus streaming series.
And then when Mark Grunwald was talking to me about doing a new She-Hulk book, he said, find a way to make it different. And I took the subway home, and on the way I thought, she knows she's in a comic book.
Byrne's stories were very meta, in which the heroine knew that she was a comic book character and would often break the fourth wall to address the reader. She was doing Deadpool a year before Deadpool, who first premiered in 1990. Throughout this solo comic book series, we follow Jennifer through her romantic life as well as her career as a lawyer. Now let's start with both characters' personality. We are introduced to Jennifer Walters, a Los Angeles criminal defense attorney trying to prove her client Monkton's innocence. She believes that he's falsely being accused of murdering the crime boss Nicholas Trask's bodyguard. During a visit from her cousin Bruce Banner, she is shot by Trask's henchmen in an effort to get her to drop the case. Having very little time to save Jen because she was rapidly losing blood, Bruce gives her a transfusion using his own radioactive blood. As Jen wakes up in the hospital where Bruce left her, Trask's goons again try to attack her, but she then changes into the She-Hulk. Probably pretty easy to rip through those flimsy hospital gowns they give you. She-Hulk chases the men down and gets them to confess to framing her client for murder in front of a group of police officers. Extremely convenient resolution, yes, but comic books only have so many pages. Now, let's compare this origin story with the Disney Plus series, which is actually much shorter. We also begin with Tatiana Maslany's Jen being introduced to us as a Los Angeles corporate attorney who is on track to making partner at a prestigious law firm. We then see Jen going on a road trip with her cousin Bruce while debating Captain America's virginity status. And their car swerves off the road trying to avoid a Sicarian space vessel that approaches them on the highway. Don't you hate when that happens? The inhibitor that Banner created that allows him to remain in his human form gets destroyed in the car crash and he bleeds into a wound on Jen's arm. We then see a disoriented Jen running into the woods as she grows and changes into the She-Hulk. Even though the comic book origin story and the live action story are very different, in both instances, when Jen becomes the She-Hulk, she retains her personality and maintains control of her actions, unlike her cousin's iteration of his alter ego, who mostly just smashes things while yelling the word smash. But this is the point where the two versions of Jennifer Walters begin to diverge. I'm still going to point out where the live action series used the comic book source material as inspiration. Jennifer Walters from the comic book series believes that she has a responsibility to use her newfound powers to help people and is depicted as someone who fights for those who aren't able to fight for themselves. Her actual mantra from the early issues of her series, The Savage She-Hulk, is whatever Jennifer Walters can't handle, the She-Hulk will do. She probably could have workshopped that a little more. She-Hulk goes on to join famous Marvel teams like the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and A-Force, of which she is a founding member. When Jen is in She-Hulk form, she feels more confident in every way and decides to permanently stay in that form. Jennifer Walters from the Disney Plus series has a very different reaction to gaining the abilities of the She-Hulk. As Bruce Banner tries to help Jen understand her powers and the inevitability of becoming a superhero, Jen rejects the idea of She-Hulk becoming an integral part of her life. I get it, a white woman culturally appropriating Hulk culture would be highly scrutinized in this day and age. We then watch as her alter ego becomes the focus of media attention and upending her life. They even coined the name She-Hulk, which at first she thinks is a lazy name for her. Throughout all of this, she struggles to maintain her previous life as a corporate attorney pushing against the patriarchy. While Maslany has moments of being an engaging character, she primarily comes off as self-absorbed and condescending due to constantly being underestimated by most of the men in the show, who think they're all a couple of brainiacs. See what I did there? The series takes notable aspects and moments from the comic books, such as Jen breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience, working for the GLK&H firm that handles superhuman law, and her going toe-to-toe with the formidable attorney, Matt Murdock. Welcome back, Daredevil, which was written by Charles Soule and drawn by Javier Perdido. While these moments connect the character to her comic book roots, Jen's overall personality is fundamentally different from her literary counterpart. We now need to discuss the evolution of Jennifer Walters and the She-Hulk's appearance. Since the comic's original run took place in the early 80s, Jen was dressed in the typical style of women during that period of time. This was done in an effort to stress Jen's averageness. Even though Jen was brave when it came to helping people, she lacked that confidence when it came to her personal life, often being depicted as shy and self-conscious. The She-Hulk was supposed to be her polar opposite, the physical manifestation of unbridled strength and confidence, which one automatically gets when they become green and jacked. The original design of the She-Hulk was similar to that of a tall, athletic Amazonian woman with a primal look due to her ripped clothing. Mike Vosburgh, the inker on the Savage She-Hulk series, talks about how he was surprised at the approach that Marvel Comics had taken in regards to the She-Hulk's appearance. The oddest thing about that book was that Frank drew really beautiful women. I drew really beautiful women, and yet the She-Hulk was never overly attractive. I guess beauty is in the eye of the inker? When John Byrne took over the series, he wanted the She-Hulk to exude high fashion and represent the modern working woman. Aside from being aware that she was a comic book character, the comic book covers of that She-Hulk series often satirized famous magazine covers of the time, and had She-Hulk posing in the nude, "This ain't your daddy's She-Hulk." Now the She-Hulk had become a highly sexualized character, which was a stark contrast to her earlier Amazonian depictions. Potential name for She-Hulk's biography, From Savage to Sexy. This is primarily where the Disney Plus series derives its inspiration for Tatiana Maslany's portrayal of the character. Maslany's Jennifer Walters is similar to her portrayal in the comic book series. She's not a particularly flashy dresser in casual situations and is usually seen in a traditional bland business suit, which fits her introverted, awkward personality. Now, when Jen is in her She-Hulk form, at first, she's forced to shop at the big and tall section at the men's warehouse because men's suits are the only clothes that fit her. But after she convinces the superhero clothing designer Luke Jacobson to make her outfits, we now see She-Hulk in high fashion style, similar to what we see in the sensational She-Hulk. This Hulk was made to smash the runway. Costume designer Anne Foley discusses how she tried to maintain She-Hulk's style from the comic book series in the 80s. What I've always done in working on Marvel projects is to go to the source material. The last major appearance comparison is that of the She-Hulk superhero costume, which I must say is very reminiscent of her traditional superhero costume that she wore in the 2004 Dan Slott comic book series. The purple and white sporty wrestling onesie with high tops brings a modern stylish flair that fits more with the personality of the comic book character than the reluctant and, can I also add, uptight hero we see in the streaming series. Foley then discusses how the suit is an extension of Jen and is a symbol of her strength. The supersuit feels like the character, and it feels empowering too. It's time for us to look at She-Hulk's comic book abilities and her Disney Plus live-action adaptation abilities. Now we have to break this down into the top 4 most important abilities, or we'll be doing this all day. I have selected intellectual prowess, superhuman abilities, natural physical abilities, and technological abilities. Let's bring up the abilities board. First, we'll take a look at intellectual prowess, and as you can see, at 50, the numbers are identical because in both versions of the character, she is a talented and successful attorney, but doesn't have a genius level intellect. I guess the Banner intellect skipped some generations. We now move on to her superhuman abilities, which both clock in at 70. And it basically includes her strength, durability, and her regenerative healing. But let's not forget her confidence. She is not nearly as strong as her cousin, although when they playfully duke it out in the pilot episode, she surprisingly holds her own against the Incredible Ruffalo. She is also able to hold her own in a battle with some of Marvel's most strongest foes in the comic books. The Disney Plus series shows that what she lacks in strength, she makes up for in agility. Now we focus on her natural physical abilities that are both at 10, because in her human form, she is an average everyday woman with no formal training in martial arts or even John Wick Kung Fu, nor is she athletic in any way, which is why She-Hulk is her complete antithesis. When we see Jen in her human form, she's particularly vulnerable to local goons that want to hurt her, which happens in the stories found in both mediums. Jen needs to carry pepper spray with her at all times. We round off She-Hulk's abilities with her technological abilities that clock in at a whopping number 10 for both versions of the character. This is because the only piece of technology that she uses is her superhero costume that changes sizes to fit both Jen Walters and She-Hulk. That's like having superhuman Spanx. I have to say that in regards to the overall stats, the Disney Plus character stayed true to the comic book source material. I just want to make note of the fact that there are multiple instances in her Marvel comic book storyline in which she becomes a more primal Hulk. She becomes much larger and her strength has increased tenfold. In the She-Hulk series written by Mariko Tamaki and drawn by Nico Leon, following the Civil War II storyline, Jen has difficulty dealing with the death of her cousin Bruce and can no longer control her alter ego. This large, savage, gray version of the She-Hulk becomes a completely separate personality that is stronger than Jen and takes over when Jen gets scared. Now maybe if the Disney Plus series had future seasons, they could explore that part of her personality, but they most likely won't get the chance. Now that we've gone over all the major aspects of She-Hulk from the comic book and Disney Plus series, we now ask the question, is Tatiana Maslany's portrayal of She-Hulk comics accurate? Drum roll, please. In my opinion, no. Now, yes, she has the blood transfusion from Bruce, and yes, she is a Los Angeles lawyer, and yes, she has the same costume, and yes, she gets all up in Daredevil's red tights, and yes, she has the same power set of the character from the comic book series, but something was lost in the translation. I'm giving the live-action adaptation 2 comic racks. I understand that in the sensational She-Hulk comic book series, Jen did want to focus more on her career, working with the district attorney over being a superhero, but she never completely walked away and was never a reluctant hero. She-Hulk was an example of a woman weighing the responsibility of having great power and making sure that it was used to make society better. the Disney Plus Jen Walters seemed to only be focused on the personal aspects of her life. I mean, they spent a whole episode finding her a stylist and success in her career, which was civil law and was an element of comedy in that series. That being said, I believe that Tatiana Maslany has the ability to bring us the She-Hulk that we deserve, and I hope that the next time we see her, she is given the opportunity to do so. Thanks for taking time out of your day to give a comic book fan like myself the opportunity to bring you into my world. If you enjoyed this video, do all of the YouTube things. Like and subscribe so you never miss a new video. My name is Tom, and this has been Comics Accurate.